Okay. The name of my article is the uh, anti-veiling movement in Turkey and Turkish nationalism in the 1920s and 1930s. The There is some contents in my articles is like introduction, Turkish nationalism, secularization and modernization, Turkish women's dress in late Ottoman period, beginning of the anti-veiling movement, local elites' role on the movement, new Turkish women, hurdles against the anti-veiling movement, opinion of some authors regarding this movement, and concluding remarks. The methodology and sources. Based on some primary and secondary sources, I have analyzed this study. The primary sources are memoirs, newspapers, and magazines, and the secondary sources are books and articles. Abstract. Uh, Turkish republicanism in 1920 to 1930s decade was introduced to make Turkey a modern and secular state. In the republicanism, the anti-veiling movements occurred to the modernization of women's dress. However, the diverse arrows regarding the campaign, for example, some Islamists rejected it based on Sharia, and some conventionalists considered it a threat to the nationalism of Turkey. This article will focus only on the anti-veiling movement in Turkey during the republicanism and its relationship with women's development, contribution, and nationalism. It will try to prove that the anti-veiling movement occurred because the women of Turkey wanted to develop their position without compromising their nationalism. This article will examine the beginning of anti-veiling movement and what was women's role at that time. Then it will focus on the laws and regulation, the roles of the elites and women's contribution to the movement. Next, this paper outlined the women's involvement in this movement, such as their involvement as an active agent of this movement, like their participation in this movement and how they were the beneficiary of this movement. For example, the increased number of female students in educational institutions gaining political rights, the ability to gain custody of children in the case of divorce, and additional economic opportunities, such as more interest in public and private job sectors. Furthermore, the article will also concentrate on women's sense of Turkishness or nationalism. Finally, the primary purpose of this article is to define this movement as a women's movement for their emancipation and uncompromising nationalism. Before we discuss all about the issues, first we should know about the Turkish nationalism, secularization, and modernization. The idea of Turkish nationalism consists of the idea of Turkishness. The nation of Turkishness emerged in the first half of the 20th century at the time of rising modern Turkey as a nation state. Nonetheless, Turkish nationalism unfolded during the last decades of the Ottoman Empire. At this time, the Ottoman Empire was gradually lost its territories, and the Ottoman Turkish Muslims, they were started to lose their faith in multi-ethnic and multi-religious empire. As a result, Turkishness emerged as an umbrella identity for the Ottoman Muslims in Anatolia. However, in 1920, more than 600 years, the old Ottoman Sultanate abolished, and in 1923, the Republic of Turkey proclaimed as a result of World War I and the Turkish War of Liberation against Greece. Then, in 1924, secularism or laicism was first introduced in the Turkish constitution with the 1928 amendment, which separated religion from the state and established a secular Turkey. This secular Turkey was built based on Western model, and their modernization followed the fashion of Western countries. In addition, in the Kemalist period, Turkish nationalism defines as the nation as an organic culture defined through language and culture. Hence, the nation-building process of the period of Kemal Atatürk mainly focused on the modernization of Turkey based on the model of the Western world. Furthermore, in the secular republic, there was a series of modernizing reforms, including the modernization or westernization of women's dress. Although there was no state law regarding the modernizations of women's dress, there were some regulations locally. Basically, at that time, the Turkish modernization was based on the Western modernization, actually. Turkish women's dress in late Ottoman period. Here I try to write about the Turkish women's dress that was women wear in the late Ottoman period. It was known as phrase and yasmak, and phrase was resembling the European style coat, and yasmak was transparent face veil. And then it was the phrase was transferred in the charasaf, and the yasmak was transferred in the face. It was like the transformation of their dresses. Beginning of the anti-veiling movement. The beginning of the anti-veiling movement was basically started from during the World War I, because at that time women were contributed in different kinds of services, like they give speeches on publicly, they were serving as nurses and women's brigades providing support services. And in addition, due to the Bolshevik Revolution, there was about 2 million white Russian refugees came to Istanbul, and their dresses or their fashion also influenced the Turkish women. The anti-veiling movement and local laws. Basically, there was no state law about the women's dress, but in 16 October 1925, there was a law about the for men, and this law was inspired some local cities councillor, and they passed some laws or decrees regarding the women's dress or not wearing their face and charasaf. And mainly in December 1934, recognition of women's political rights boosted this movement. Actually, due to the political rights, women's participation in public places increased. In most cases, they wore modern dresses. Hence, from this movement, the primary beneficiary was the woman. Then the state's involvement of the movement. There was no, as I mentioned before, there was no state law regarding this movement, but there was a debate in RPP Congress about this movement. Like in 1935, the debate took place, and the Haqqi Tariq US, who was the member of the parliament and from Greece, he actually he believed that in the power of the law to effect a social change in the issue of women's dress. And he was like he wanted to law, there should be a law. But on the other hand, the Minister of the Interior, Shukru Khayyam, he believes that no, there is no necessity of the law. And the Mustafa Kemal Atatürk also believed that there is a natural law which will take care of it most easily than any written law. It called actually the fashion. The local areas roles on the movement. Local elites lords actually, local elites were basically from the local administrators and the members of the People's House, sports clubs, professional organization associations, and the leading contributors of local newspapers. And they most of the local elites were supported the movement, and they were like publishing news regarding this movement. The anti-veiling movement and the nationalism. Actually, the focus of this article is the anti-veiling movement and the nationalism. The anti-veiling movement and the nationalism were not the conflict. One of the essential purpose of this movement was against the wear of face veil, pace and charasa, but not the local traditional dresses. And at that time, there was no hindrance to wear the local traditional dress, and women has their right to wear their traditional dress. There no cities or no one was interfering to wear that kind of dress. Some, yes, but most of the Turkish women choose the Western dress, who wear Western dress and the regulation. But it was their own choice and their convenience. But there was no law regarding this. Acceptance of the new attire. Actually, when the movement was occurred in Turkey, then there was kind of problem to their acceptance. The old generation women who were didn't accept it from the very beginning. I read memoirs of the written by the Halide Edip. She write about her own granny's experience. Her granny was at that time was not ready to accept these changes. On the other hand, the women who were a modern generation, they are young, they were basically from the urban women, they were willing to accept this change, and they were more they wanted to obey the regulations of their new attire. Okay, the new Turkish woman. However, this movement turns Turkey into a new age, and there were a lot of development happens in the Turkish woman life. They weekly Idigan. It was published in the 7 days. It was published a column highlighted the difference between the old and new Turkey in the honor of Turkey's 10th anniversary. In this column, they highlighted the development that happens in the life of Turkish women in the republicanism. Here, I give a citation here. They write about the position of the woman before the movement and after the movement. And there is some other examples, like in Chicago Tribune in 1914, there was some articles and some writing regarding this, how this movement was affect the women's education and how the women's education was developed at that time. And not only the women's education, but also their political lives and the other other lives, like on October 4, 1926, the Turkish Civil Code made polygamy illegal. And the equal rights of divorce and custody of children were given to both parents, and the equality of inheritance of women was also granted. Hurdles against the independent movement. However, there is always hurdles remains in any kind of movement or any kind of initiative. So in this movement was not exception. In this movement, there are some hurdles, and the women who were like the old generation I mentioned before, they were against it, and some men who were the conventionalist thinking, they were also against this movement. Like here I write about an news which was published in 8 April 1912 in the New York Times. There's the father and the husbands were pushes their wife and daughters to wear the face and karsaf and veil themselves. And there is another reason there for men were not supported. Some men were not supported, like that if women were entered into the workforce, and it was the cost of their unemployment. Here I mentioned some opinion about the authors in this regarding these movements. In my article, I mentioned about the articles which is which is edited by the author, Stephen Krunin, in his book, The Anti-Veiling Campaigns in Muslim World, Gender, Modernism, and the Politics of Dress. And I also write the, in that articles, like their opinions is like in Carthian level, he actually the author actually writes about their modernization of Turkish women's attire, their entrance of the working sector, their educational and political rights created a picture of modern and new Turkey. And another articles, the author writes about that, that like they were also worried about their the men who were against the movement, because they were also worried about their jobs, and the time of unveiling movement, women interest in the workforce when increased. And here also write about the opinion of Halil Mas from the Becoming Turkish book, Becoming Turkish, and like the Sevgi Adak from the Anti-Veiling Campaigns movement. In the Sevgi Adak, he argues that like the anti-veiling movement was not occurred due to one factor, that it was even more complex, since it was shaped by support all as well as the resistance of various actors at the local level, and simultaneously by the interaction between Ankara and the provinces. However, in this article, I argue that in this movement, the main actor was women, and it was actually basically their movement. Women, the main actor of the movement. Based on the analysis of the secondary and primary sources in this article, argues that although the anti-veiling movement was the result of different factors such as the Western pressure, the national building process, the involvement of local laws and elite, the main actor in this movement was women's desire for their emancipation and development, because the beginning of the changes of women attire was started from the late Ottoman Empire, and the urban women were started to wear the fashionable cloth before the republicanism. Although the head law in 1925 and the local laws boosted the velocity of the movement, but women played the central role, including their spontaneous contribution on the movement. This movement was not only occurred in Turkey only. In 1920 to 1930, this time, unveiling took place in Iran, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. And in Bangladesh, then it was the undivided Bangla under the British colonial rule, the consequences regarding women's educational and political rights raised. In 1916, Begum Rokeya, a Bengali writer, feminist thinker, teacher, and political activist, founded Muslim Women's Association and Organization in order to fight for women's education and employment. Hence, in the contemporary time, not only in Turkey, but also many parts of the world, the women started to stand for their basic rights, such as education, economic empowerment, and political rights. Concluding levers. However, in this conclusion, I tried to prove my argument and my logic, like the intervening movements in the Turkish republicanism was part of the Turkish nation building process, which refers to making Turkey a modern Western nation. However, this movement was not solely the product of the republicanism, because the change in women's attire started in the late Ottoman period. Like other parts of the world in the 1920 and 1930 decades, Turkish women were also conscious about the rights and unwilling to confine themselves to their homes. They wanted to be educated and independent. Hence, the anti-veiling movement was a stepping stone for them to achieve their emancipation from their miserable life, such as polygamy system and the deprivation of education. They could lead an independent life due to their economic independence, as they started to work in different sectors like government offices, industries, and hospitals. Hence, they could contribute significantly to society and the states. And it was not about against their nationalism, because they never it was never put any hurdles to wearing any kind of traditional or national dress. Thank you. That's it, I think.